There's Rich Hagen sitting alongside Ian Duke, who is ideally positioned, not just on my left, but because you're inside R&D, to talk about the way this set came together and what R&D is trying to accomplish with all the color pairs. Now, you saw part one on our screen there. That's because tomorrow we'll come back and we'll talk about the enemy color pairs, but this time around, Ian, we're going to talk about the friendlies, colors that play nice together.
Yeah, that's right. Or if you want to think about it, colors that are next to each other on the back of Magic card.
All right, so why don't we kick off then with white-blue, and the theme for white-blue is spirits. So let's take a look at that. Ian, what's going on with spirits?
So each of these allied color pairs has both a creature type or tribal element to it, and also a mechanical or strategic element associated with it. So white-blue is spirits as a creature tribe, but it's also just sort of your classic blue-white flyers deck. You want to hold down the ground with some defensive creatures and attack in the air with flyers.
How strong is the tribal element this time around? Because certainly, like, if you look at Oath of the Gatewatch Battle for Zendikar wasn't technically a tribal set, but it sure felt like there were sort of invisible tribes that you were constantly trying to draft, like some cards that only belonged in certain tribes. So how strong is that tribal element?
It's pretty weak in this particular color pair of white and blue. There aren't a lot of common level rewards that reward you for having lots of spirits in your deck. There's a few, like Apothecary Geist, but most of the rewards for spirits come at higher rarities. So I would think of this more like a traditional blue-white flyers deck than as a tribal spirits deck.
Right, so something like Storm Rider Spirit, it's more the fact that it's a 3/3 flyer with flash rather than the spirit bit.
Precisely.
All right, okay, why don't we take a look at the top 5 commons that are being picked by you in winning Magic Online decks. So here come the top 5 commons: Angelic Purge, Dauntless Cathar, Sleep Paralysis, Niblis of Dusk, and Stitched Mangler. What stands out, Ian?
So Angelic Purge and Sleep Paralysis are just the premier removal spells in each of these two colors. Angelic Purge being particularly useful because it can really take out almost any problematic permanent and also adds to your Delirium, of which this deck benefits a little bit. Dauntless Cathar, a great creature that can give you extra value, flashing back as a spirit token from the graveyard. Niblis of Dusk, one of the best aggressive spirits with the Prowess ability, which can trigger off of your non-creature spells. And then Stitched Mangler is a particularly great card in this deck. Comes onto the battlefield and taps an enemy creature, holds it down for a turn, which can let your flyers get an additional attack.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you more about that card in a little bit, because I think we're going to see more of it. Let's take a look at the uncommons then that are being picked 1st through 5th in the draft winners on Magic Online. Ian.
Yeah, so Spectral Shepherd is an example of a little bit of spirit tribal, as we call it, caring about spirits mattering. And this can pick up a spirit off the battlefield back to your hand, so you can either have sort of a resilient blocker that comes back, or you can replay your spirit to get an enter the battlefield ability or something along those lines.
Super simple question about that card. Why do you have the activation as blue rather than just keeping it as white?
Great question. So these are what we call our Signpost uncommons. Okay. We do these in most sets these days, and often they're 2-color, multicolor cards, or gold cards, if you will, that have those 2 colors, and they tell you about what that color pair is about in Limited, how to draft it. In this case, we went with a cycle of 10 cards, each of which has an off-color activation, so they sort of count as multicolored, but you could play them in a deck that only has one of the colors.
Right, but nonetheless, to get the full value, you must be in the precise
Exactly,
pair.
And so it guides you into this is what spirits do.
Gold light.
Yes.
I suppose, as opposed to gold knight, which is something different. All right, let's move on to our next color pair. It's blue-black, and this time, Arg. It's zombies.
Yeah, these are the zombies. Blue-black is a really interesting color pair because it's got a lot going on. There's a little bit of zombie tribal, as we talked about earlier. There's also madness, and there's elements of delirium as well. So you can kind of take this archetype and go in a couple different directions, depending on what's open in the packs.
All right, so if we look at the top 5 commons then for blue-black, maybe we're going to see a little bit of schizophrenic nature to this. Well, let's see. Murderous Compulsion, removal, deadweight removal, sleep paralysis, quasi-removal, Ghoulcaller's Accomplice, and then there's that Stitched Mangler again. Yep. Why is that card so good? It doesn't look inherently powerful. I mean, it is only a common, but
it sort of does double duty. If your deck's being aggressive, playing out in an aggressive way, it can tap down an enemy blocker, or it can just buy you time by tapping down a would-be attacker. It has 3 toughness, which is nice, so when it does finally untap, it's a good blocker as well. And it's a zombie for the few things that care about that.
I know something that you love to do in R&D is give players simple yet horrendously awesome things to do. And anyone who has madness, murderous compulsion when their opponents attack, that's, you know, that's a prime example of something. It's very simple. I could wait until my turn, but the fact you let me do it on theirs as they attack for the win, that always feels great.
Yeah, being able to cast a sorcery spell at instant speed is one of the hidden, many hidden values of madness that's out there.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Particularly apparent on that card.
All right, let's go to the top uncommons then in the blue-black zombies archetype. Let's see what we've got. Geezer's Bidding, and then creature.
Yeah, a lot of these are just great value card. Geese's Bidding is great with Madness, just a good card to cast on its own. I do really want to call out Reckless Scholar as one of the top uncommons here. This is a card that in any other set would be, you know, good but not spectacular. In this set, it really is spectacular. Having those looter type creatures, draw a card and discard a card, of course we call looting, is just so good with Madness, because instead of drawing a card and discarding a card and being sort of card neutral there, you're actually up a full card and casting a spell, sometimes for cheaper.
Right, I love the way you've done that with really absolutely transforming what cards like Tormenting Voice do for you, what Macabre Waltz does for you. I just think, you know, those are cards that I played with first time around and would just like, I suppose, maybe. And I'm like, thank you, Tormenting Voice number 2, Macabre Waltz number 2.
It's amazing how Madness and also Delirium change the value of those cards.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so that's blue-black. Let's head on we'll stay with black, moving around the color pairs, ally pairs, remember. Black-red, this time, it's the Bloodsuckers, it's the Vampires.
Yeah, these are the Vampires. There actually are more tribal rewards, a little bit more tribal rewards for Vampires than some of the other tribes, so look out for those. But mechanically, what Vampires are doing is they're playing with Madness.
Our sense of the Vampires is that it says there a fast, aggressive deck, but there aren't many of those around. Is the format quite slow, and do you think that the Vampires have the tools to get through the Watchers in the Web and the 1/5 Silent Observers and so on?
So if there's a deck that does, Vampires is absolutely near the top of the list. It is one of the more aggressive decks in the format. This format, I wouldn't characterize it as particularly aggressive or particularly slow. I think it has a wider range than many other formats do. But if you do find yourself in an aggressive black-red Vampires deck, you can have some of the most powerful starts available in the format. And a lot of that is because of Madness. Okay,
let's get to the top 5 commons then. In black-red, here they come. So you've got Fiery Temper removal, Dead Weight removal, the Hasty Voldaren Duelist you see on the left there, Blood Mad Vampire, and Twins of Marrow State. The card I want to ask you there most about, Ian, is Blood Mad Vampire, because Magic is always a game of tension in cards, when you want them to be great, when they're really good, and you want to be punished when they're not good. Blood Mad Vampire feels like a card that sits right in the middle, where if you ever get that going, things are fantastic. But when they're sitting there with a little 1/1 token off Call the Bloodline or something, and you've had nowhere to get it through, you draw it mid-game, and you just think, what is this doing in my deck? It's never doing anything other than trading for a 2/2 sometimes.
Yeah, that card is so high on this list largely because of other cards that support it. So in the first case, it's Madness. And especially being able to play this card at instant speed at the end of your opponent's turn off of, say, a Mad Prophet or something along those lines, you can really surprise your opponent. Maybe they attacked with all of their defensive blockers or only left up something they don't want to block with, and now you can hit them for 4 and start getting counters on your creatures. That's really powerful. And the other thing is any card that removes your opponent's blockers in some way, either removal spells or what we call falter type effects that stop enemy creatures from blocking, can really get this through for a ton of damage and start leveling it up.
Yeah, and then it gets utterly ferocious. So those are your commons. How about the top 5 uncommons you've been drafting in your Magic Online winning decks? Here they come. Incorrigible Use, then don't encourage me. Lightning Axe, Heir of Falkenrath. Yeah, we've just seen that in action, win an entire game from start to finish in round 1 for Reed Duke against Shahar Shenhar, Olivia's Bloodsworn the Flyer, and Ravenous Bloodseeker.
All these cards are great, but I think the card that should really stand out to everyone here is Heir of Falkenrath. This card is just so good on so many levels, and I think it's slightly deceptively good, not because it looks bad, but because it's just so much better than it looks when you actually play with it. Having a 0-mana Madness outlet is just awesome, and being able to start attacking for 3 in the air on turn 3 is just what this deck wants.
Keep that graphic on screen if you would, please. In case you haven't seen this at home, I do just want to draw attention to the way the Heir of Falkenrath is portrayed. I hope you have all seen by now the bat that features in that artwork at the collar line, and that when it transforms, you see that again. That's just one of the most fabulous little Easter eggs I think Magic's ever had. And I know most of you will have seen that and maybe even seen the animated GIF of it by now, but it is truly extraordinary. First time you see it, you just go, yep. And that's yet another reason why Magic's one of the best games in the world. All right, so there we go. That's your black-red vampires. Let's move on. We'll stick with red. Let's go to green next. That's our next color pair. And this is an interesting one. It's time to howl at the moon, and it's the werewolves.
Yeah, the classic werewolves. These are, iconic creatures from the original Zendikar. They're back here. They're all double-faced as well. There is a bit of werewolf tribal as well that you can pick up at higher rarities. And this is, at its core, a beatdown deck. It's not as fast and low to the ground as some of the others like white-red or black-red are. But it is an attack deck, and you're trying to flip your werewolves. So those are the things to look out for.
Talking of transforming, we should explain, you've been very subtle and then also very complicated. This is the subtle end. Werewolves all work the same way for double-faced cards. It is as simple as get to the end of turn, nothing happened, turns day into night, over they come, and then at the other end, well, there was an awful lot going on there. People must be waking up, back to daytime, and back we transform. Once we get past the werewolves, you really took things off the chain, didn't you, in terms of just so many different ways for things to transform and back or not.
Definitely true.
But werewolves, you're on straightforward ground. Nothing happens, they transform. Too much happens, they transform back. Let's take a look at the top 5 commons then in the red-green werewolves archetype. So we kick off with Hinterland Logger, you see on the left there. Rabid Bite, Fiery Temper, no surprise there. The very large and potentially even larger Solitary Hunter. And then Quilled Wolf. Quilled Wolf, Ian, do you see that? I know something that R&D likes to do in every set is try to create cards that are okay in multiple positions in a game. A 6/6 is great on turn 6 or 7, and a 2/2 is good on turn 2. Quilled Wolf's a card which is trying to be both.
Yeah, definitely true. We call cards like this mana sinks, and they give you the awesome value of being able to play your card early in the game. It's not only a super expensive card that you need to wait until turn 6 or 7 to cast, but then when it is later in the game and you have extra mana floating around, it can sort of level up and give you a way to spend that extra mana.
All right, so those are our commons. Let's head into the top uncommons then for green-red. Ulrich's Kindred, Duskwatch Recruiter, Inner Struggle, the Kessig Forge Master, which is a card I love, and Howpat Resurgence. At the Grand Prix last weekend, Ian, one of the questions that our text coverage team asked, the top 8, was, how would you like to open your draft? But we made it a little more complex. We didn't just say, yeah, you can have Avacyn, or you can have a Nahiri or a Sorin. Said, what uncommon do you want? And I think it was 5 out of the 8 went with Duskwatch Recruiter. Can you speak to just how good that card is as a first pick in a draft?
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, in some ways similar to the previous card we were talking about, where it can just come down on turn 2 and be a Grizzly Bears, which is fine. When it transforms, I mean, you're getting a bigger creature. You're also getting a discount on any creature spells you cast. So if you're on the play and you play this on turn 2 and your opponent misses their 2-drop, and your Duskwatch Recruiter transforms, you are in great shape there, just casting tons and tons of creatures. And then late game, it also serves as another mana sink card, as we were talking about earlier, where it can just get you extra value by spending your mana to find more creatures.
Duskwatch Recruiter is a poster example of what you've just said there, but is red-green the deck that is keeping the format honest in the sense of, that even if you are a blue-red control deck that you want to get to a very late game, if you're blue-white flyers and you want to play 5 and 6 mana flyers, you must have a turn 2 play at the ready, because this is the deck that says, you forgot to start playing Magic when you were meant to, and now you're just way too far behind.
Definitely true. The presence of werewolves absolutely alters pick orders and deck composition for all the other decks in the format as well. Like you said, greater emphasis on having 2-drops to cast earlier in the game. Oftentimes, things like equipment can be really good here, because you can save your equipment for a turn when you wouldn't otherwise have a play to make, even if you're just casting the equipment and not equipping it. In the original Innistrad, Blazing Torch was great for that, I remember. And now there's plenty more equipment to do that with as well. It also makes bounce spells like Just the Wind extra important, because you can either cast this to prevent werewolves from transforming, or cast it on a transformed werewolf, and then now your opponent has to go through all these extra steps to get it back again.
Something else that's changed in the last 6 months, is the position of life gain versus the position of what we call reach. Not the keyword reach, as in can block flyers, but the ability to get an opponent to 8 life, 6 life, and just put them to dead kind of just by pointing spells at their head, whether that's Fiery Tempers or Explosive Apparatus, or going Rush of Adrenaline +2/+1 and trample on a little 2/1 flyer. And the life gain is now much more incidental, much reduced in its powerfulness. So if you can get someone to 8/7/6, getting them down to 0 is a little bit easier than it used to be.
Yeah, and especially you mentioned some cards that have or grant trample is a really big deal when you're playing red-green werewolves. Lots of the werewolves, can get trample either when they're transformed or not, and also cards like Rush of Adrenaline, just punching through for that extra damage, can be very, very real ways to end the game.
All right, so up next, our last pair in the friendly colors, go round the color wheel, we get to green-white, and that means humans. So let's take a look at those. What's going on with humans?
So humans are another relatively aggressive deck. Mechanically, they're playing with equipment. And of course, there's all kinds of humans in the set that are there battling against the monsters. So you want to pick up as many as you can and get your tribal rewards and your equipment rewards.
Now, the equipment's interesting because this is a real juggling act for R&D. If you make them inherently good, then everyone wants them. If you make them inherently terrible, a strategy like this doesn't work. Somehow, you have to make the human player want them and other people not want them, broadly.
Right.
Tough ask.
Yeah, it's really targeting a very narrow band of power where they will float around the table to the humans player, but then they're very powerful in the humans deck. So you can kind of think of what we do is we take a little bit of the power of the equipment and we shave it off and we put it on some of the humans themselves. So when you combine the two, it's just as satisfyingly powerful. But if you don't have the creatures that like to be equipped or like you to have equipment, then you'll probably pass along the equipment to someone who wants it more.
All right, let's see whether equipment features in our top 5 commons for green-white as we take a look to see what those are. And this is, remember, is what you've been drafting on Magic Online in the winning decks, top 5 picks. Here we go: Dauntless Cathar, Byway Courier, Rayward Bite, Hinterland Logger, and Solitary Hunter. So no equipment there, but again, you don't need them in the first picks because hopefully you're the only player who really wants those mid-ranking equipments.
Yeah, and I will point out that even though they don't say it on the card, Dauntless Cathar and Byway Courier both play really well with equipment because they give you a little bit of extra value and card flow, so you can equip them and trade them off and then maybe get a spirit token back from the graveyard and equip that.
All right, let's take a look at the top 5 uncommons then for green-white. There you see Veteran Cathar, Nearheath Chaplain. I love Lambholt Pacifist. I'm not sure how amazing it is, but I really, really like it. And then you've got Pack Guardian, huge, of course, and Dustwatch Recruiter again.
Yeah, Pack Guardian, just a great card in any green deck for sure. Lambholt Pacifist, another card that sort of has a hidden way of playing well with equipment. You can actually even equip it, and then it'll see itself as something with 4 greater power. So,
all right, well, great stuff. If you like playing with allied colors, cards, colors that play well together, those are the first 5. Tomorrow we'll be back with part 2 when we'll go into the enemy colors, see how well they work together, the likes of your black-green, your black-white, and so on. So we'll do that, but for now, that's the story of the Magic Online Draft Archetypes here at Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad.